What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, man. Once again, another double I SWI, and this is a phone that I really hear nothing talked about anymore. I mean, this is a phone that literally like showed up and then said bye. And it's kind of sad too, because this is a phone manufacturer that, HTC, that was humongous at a point. There was a time where like the HTC brand was just crazy, and if you heard it, you pretty much took HTC. That it was the Samsung at one point, in my opinion. I know that's kind of like going maybe out there, but when HTC dropped a phone, that was pretty much what made headlines. And I think even back to like the 1M7, even before that, probably with like the 1X or whatever phones there were at the time, those phones, I saw so many commercials, so many people wanted them, and I was super envious. Even the HTC Evos, those phones were crazy. And back in the day, every time I would open up a magazine, that was pretty much the only ads I would see there. And a lot of people were talking about them. A lot of reviewers on YouTube at the time still discussed them. But nowadays, it just seems like HTC is trying really hard to play catch up, and I haven't even heard anything about HTC recently. Now they have collaborated with Google a couple times for their Google Pixels, so maybe that's one thing how they're staying afloat, and they have a lot of other projects they're working on, I assume. But recently they really haven't been doing much, in my opinion. And one of my main phones I used at a time was actually the HTC Inspire, and that was a pretty decent phone, but that's all in the past. Let's go ahead and take a look at the HTC 10 and see how this thing holds up in 2019. Now, I'll tell you one thing, okay? Obviously this phone looks a little bit outdated. Not only do we have like the home button on the front, more so the fingerprint sensor on it, but we also have pretty thick bezels. But one thing I'll definitely tell you is this phone does not feel like a cheap phone at all. This phone still feels like a very premium phone, as it should, because when this thing was, released, it was the flagship at the time. And I'll definitely tell you, like, even though it doesn't look that premium, I would say HTC's build quality has always been amazing. Even back with the Inspire that came out in like, I don't remember, like 2010, 2011, that build quality on the phone was amazing, and this one is no doubt, and it's definitely not an exception to that. It's a very premium feeling phone, no doubt. And looking around the body, we do have a pretty big front facing camera, which is kind of funny. I'll get into that in a second. Obviously the earpiece on the side, the front fingerprint sensor is right there as well. Looking on the back, we have a single camera sensor, and like I said, if you're looking at this phone and we're looking at phones now in 2019, obviously there's a pretty big gap. Like, the 2019 phones look way better than this one, but I still think in 2016 there wasn't really that much crazy innovation going around. Of course, there was still, people pushing the boundaries. LG always had pretty much slim bezels, but this was still at a time where like the Galaxy S7 was out and all those other phones with front-facing home buttons and fingerprint sensors. So I guess we're gonna give HTC 10 a pass. I would say all phones before early 2017, I would kind of give a pass with this type of design, so that's kind of where I'm going to go with these things from now on. Looking on the front, we do have a 5.2-inch 1440p IPS panel. It's actually a super LCD panel, and what I'll definitely tell you is, without a doubt, I don't think it's a bad panel at all. I still think it's pretty sharp. HTC was always kind of notorious for having pretty good looking LCD panels. I think they had a phone, the HTC Butterfly, I think, or some phone like that. The panel on that phone was amazing. I think that one was only like 1080p as well, but that was a very sharp looking panel. This one is no exception, like I said. Good looking panel. I wish it was OLED. I don't know why the phone manufacturers always did this back then, but that is definitely one cool thing about this phone. So that kind of covers up the phone on the outside, how it feels. Like I said, it feels pretty premium. Let's go ahead and talk about the software. So one thing that you might be surprised with is that with Sense UI, I was also not a humongous fan with. As you know, I'm pretty much diss every software that's not either like stockish Android. Oxygen OS is an amazing OS, or it's custom ROMmed. This phone had the Sense UI on it. One cool thing is you are able to upgrade it to Android Oreo. When this thing was released, it was released with Android 6.0.1 Marshmallow, and kind of looking at it now, I mean, I'm just not a huge fan of its specific software. Even back in the day when I had it on like Sense UI, like Android Gingerbread, or even Ice Cream Sandwich or Jelly Bean, whatever I had it with, I was just never a fan of it. I mean, I don't know what it was. It just seems like it's just so weird looking. The newer one doesn't look as bad as the older one, but still, there's quite a bit of gap between, what I kind of like in a phone in terms of software and what this brought. And I'll definitely tell you that if your standards are pretty low, like if you just want to test out different waters, Sense UI isn't a bad thing at all. But I think maybe that is one thing where HTC was in the back end of, Samsung seems to be in the forefront right now, obviously behind Google and I would say OnePlus as well. But HTC, I'm not too sure what they did. Obviously they have the newer phones like the HTC Ultra and all that stuff, but I think in terms of software, they kind of dropped the ball But I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys like Sense UI? Let me know in the comment section below. I usually say that at the end of the video, but I feel like this is the one exception I will use that rule. So in terms of software, throw a launcher on it. If you kind of move some things around, you might be okay with it. But me personally, I wasn't always the greatest fan of Sense UI, but as of right now, this thing's probably not going to get any more updates after this, so kind of sad, but I think they updated it more than I was expecting them to update it, so that's that. So that pretty much covers up the software aspect of it. Now let's go ahead and go into the performance aspect of it. Now I'm going to tell you the specs like I always do. I'll tell you right now, this is probably the most boring part, but I had to get through that in order to tell you my real world use. So this thing had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 820 chipset, a quad-core CPU, an Adreno 530 GPU, and 4 gigs of RAM. Now, the cool thing is, and what I'll tell you is, a lot of phones, even in this day and age, still only have 4 gigs of RAM, but a lot of them have since upgraded from the Snapdragon 820 chipset. You know, that's not necessarily the newest thing out right now. And what I'll tell you is I mean, depending on your performance and your, demandingness from a phone, you might be okay with this phone, you might not be. And this is, I know that might sound like common sense, but I'll tell you like this, on my performance that I usually do on a day-to-day basis, it really just depends what I'm doing. Sometimes I do edit video and audio on my phone sometimes. So in a case like that, this phone might have some trouble doing it. And I'll definitely tell you, in audio editing, it's not going to have trouble with. But with the video editing, it might, because this phone did kind of heat up a little bit when I was using it at the time. And it wasn't like heating up in sense of like having so many things open or whatever. It's just when you have a specific app open, you don't necessarily expect it to heat up like so fast. But this thing kind of had that issue a little bit. If you're playing it in a very intensive game, you can noticeably feel it. And that's one thing I'll definitely tell you about this phone, which is kind of sad because this phone, since it's made out of aluminum, in my opinion, this phone, whenever a phone's made out of aluminum or glass, it just heats up like crazy. You can definitely feel it. I think glass more so, but I think I just said the most common sense thing in the world. But this thing will, I guess, will handle whatever you throw at it. If you go heavy intensive stuff, obviously things will change. In terms of casual gaming and stuff, casual games aren't bad at all, as you can tell. But once you go up to heavier intensive games, you can also see there's some skipped frames here and there. I could probably get through a game, no doubt. I mean, obviously I can. Look at the freaking graphics on this thing. But you can tell there's some skipped frames here and there. So all in all, I mean, it's not really that bad of a deal in my opinion. I think overall performance on this thing is pretty good. I just don't think it's top tier, especially in 2019. I mean, you have to factor in the age and the price tag, and I always do that when I'm recommending a phone and when I'm doing a double ISY. So just remember that it's not the best performing thing in the world, but factoring in the age and the price, I guess it's whatever. Now moving on to the camera quality. So if you guys don't remember, HTC did that one thing where they did like the 4 megapixel, ultra pixel, whatever thing they did. Since then, they actually moved away from that on the HTC 10. I think they moved away from it on the HTC One M9, but I don't really remember. This thing has a single 12 megapixel sensor. You can do optical image stabilization, laser autofocus, and what I'll definitely tell you is I don't think the camera on this is bad at all. I think this is still a pretty solid camera. Obviously, it's probably not as good as like the newest cameras we have now, but you're still able to do things like shooting 4K videos. The camera app still has a lot of settings within the app, so that is cool. I remember back in the day, the HTC One M7 was one of the first phones that I saw. I'm not saying it's the first phone overall, but it's one of the first phones that I saw in real life that could do slow motion video. And I'm just remembering that now at like a throwback when I'm talking about the camera of this phone. So I'll definitely tell you that in terms of the camera quality, you're probably not going to complain too much. I barely ever use the camera on my phone anyway. I have a DSLR, as you can tell I shoot these videos with. So all in all, I definitely say, dude, the HTC 10 in terms of camera quality isn't bad. The front has a 5 megapixel sensor. That one also has optical image stabilization, which is surprising. You can shoot 1080p videos on it too, and man, like I've said in every single day, Android phone manufacturers, even including HTC, they kind of didn't do so hot in 2016, even like early 2017, I would say. They really needed to pick up the ball. I guess the Google Pixel changed things a little bit, but not as much as they should have. All in all, I think the camera sensors on this thing, when combined, are actually not bad, and I think they still kind of hold up in 2019. Now let's talk about the battery life. So this thing does have a USB Type-C port, which is awesome. No wireless charging though, which is kind of a shame, but this thing does have a 3000 milliamp hour battery in it. And without a doubt, I'll definitely tell you that this is not a phone where you want to be getting if you depend on battery life too much. And what I mean by that is that, yes, in 2016, this thing had a 3000 milliamp hour battery, but this thing over time, just like any other battery, the batteries do degrade over time. So this thing is not at the full 3000 anymore. It's probably at like 2200 or maybe even less than that, depending on how badly the person who you bought it from treated it, because most likely you're buying it used. I don't think you're buying this new anymore. So you kind of have to factor that in, which is kind of a shame. I'll definitely say that because the screen is so high resolution, it's 1440p, the pixels per inch is kind of high at 568 pixels per inch. That's pretty high actually. It's not spec'd completely heavy, but it still kind of is. It's in that weird spot. You're probably going to, and because the screen's not OLED, you know, you're not getting the dark power saving things, whatever. I'll definitely tell you that I wouldn't expect this thing to last you a day on my specific use. And like I said, my use can vary from being extremely heavy to not being heavy, but I don't want that thing where like, oh, I have to use it some days and I can't use this other days because I depend too much and have to have a charger around with me. I don't really like that. I like having a little bit of flexibility, and with the HTC 10, I don't necessarily feel like I would be getting that from this specific phone. So you kind of do have to keep that in mind when, you know, purchasing a phone like this. But I don't think a lot of you guys who are currently looking for an HTC 10 are complaining too much about it. I think most of you who are watching this own the HTC 10 and want to see, you know, is this a phone that I still want to keep, or is there more in the future, or just kind of justifying your purchase overall. I think that's one thing I realized with a lot of my videos is I would say like 50% of them are like people who are wanting to buy the phone and 50% of them who already have the phone. So that kind of pretty much covers up the whole entire HTC 10 as of in 2019. Now let me talk about some other key points to kind of wrap this whole entire video up. Like I said, USB Type-C on the bottom, very, very cool. My voice just cracked. A 5.2-inch Super LCD panel, not bad at all. 1440p, 565 pixels per inch, a very sharp panel in my opinion. Not an OLED, but who cares? This phone still feels very, very premium in my opinion. Camera quality on the back is pretty good. Camera quality on the front, not so much. This thing does have Android Oreo, so that is very, very cool. Micro SD card slot, which is a must. I'm so glad they put that on this phone. So to kind of wrap this whole entire thing up, man, is the HTC 10 still worth it in 2019? What I will tell you is that, dude, if you're okay with having like at least like a 2-year outdated phone in terms of software, because Android Q is going to be coming out in a couple months, then I guess that's okay. I mean, I guess it's not that bad of a phone. I mean, you can definitely get to point A to point B. It's not a completely slow phone, but this phone doesn't necessarily excel at anything, you know. And I would just question, like, why would you want to buy this phone when there's so many other phones out there in the market for, I guess, around this price tag? I mean, in my opinion, I would probably pick up a Google Pixel over this thing, like the original one, because that thing, even though it probably doesn't look as good as this thing and it probably doesn't feel as premium as this thing either, I think that has a lot more going for it, especially in terms of the custom ROM development community behind it and the root community behind it, because there's still a lot of stuff that you can do with the original Google Pixel, and I believe that is still getting Android Q. So I would probably recommend you getting a Google Pixel over the HTC 10. And another phone I'd probably recommend would be like a OnePlus 5 or OnePlus 3T. Those phones kind of look like this thing too. I've already made separate reviews of those too, and the Google Pixel, so if you want to watch those, go back on my channel and go watch them. But I'll leave links in the description for the cheapest HTC 10, a Google Pixel, and the OnePlus 3T or OnePlus 5, whichever one they sell on Amazon. I'll find the cheapest ones on Amazon, only come straight in the description below, as well as the prices, so you can buy them straight through there, and you can also help out the channel at the same time. Every single sale that goes through those links, obviously a little bit of that revenue comes back to the channel, and we can do more videos like this, more comparisons, and more giveaways. So it means so much if you guys could hit that. But that is pretty much it, man. If you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.